All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to revisit a story I did a while back concerning a Goldsboro police officer, one Mr. Matthew Habermus, that reportedly committed suicide on July the 17th of this year, probably about 4 or 5 months ago. Now, I was alerted to this death by someone who lives in his neighborhood, and they asked me had I heard about it, and at that time I had not. And it seemed strange to me because most of the time when a police officer dies, there's a big, they kind of roll out the red carpet, the flags are flown at half staff, the 20, the trumpets are blown, though all of those things normally happen, and they may have happened, but to my knowledge, this death kind of flew under the radar. And so when I originally heard about it, that kind of raised my antennas. So I went down to the Register of Deeds and looked up the cause of death because somebody told me that he had committed suicide, and I was like, well, if he committed suicide, surely that would have been publicized, and that would have been kind of front page news. Goldsboro police officer commits suicide. Maybe once again, maybe that's I'm in the wrong world, but nevertheless, his death. If you look up the article, it said he passed quietly at home. He was a great officer. He loved fishing and hunting, which is kind of misleading because if somebody commits suicide, his life wasn't as cookie cutter great as you make it sound. Nevertheless, I dug into it and found out that he, was committed suicide in his home. Now, for a 45-year-old healthy man to commit suicide, there had to be something more going on. So, since I did the video, and I'm going to share this investigative report with you, there's a whole synopsis of the entire situation, including his death. But since I did the video, I received some information from a very credible source that at the time of his death, Mr. Matthew Habermus was not in such a great, reputable state. It was reported to me that at the time of his death, Mr. Habermas was somewhat under investigation, if not investigation, very intense scrutiny for his role in once again, allegedly taking a certain amount of money from the evidence room. Now, the reason that Mr. Habermas was implicated is because after he did the deed, after he, I guess, went in and took an undisclosed amount of money from the evidence room, he had mentioned something to a colleague of his, and he asked a question that somewhat raised the antennas or raised the suspicion of his colleague. And so therefore his colleague went back and looked at the video cameras. And when he looked at the video cameras, Mr. Habermas was seen entering and or leaving with a duffel bag. And when the colleague went back and checked, the evidence room to, I guess, ensure that everything was still as it should be, he noticed that the money was missing. And of course, according to the cameras, the only one who came in and out of there with a duffel bag was the deceased Mr. Matthew Habermas. Now, it was then that Mr. Habermas was allegedly either placed on administrative leave or they began investigating him. So he actually felt that the heat was coming in. My source did not tell me how much time elapsed between this incident and his occurrence of death. So I cannot, with good intent speculate that. However, that was the source of, a lot of what people believe his reasonings for unaliving himself. Now, also, the individual told me that a few weeks prior to his death, Mr. Habermus got into a terrible motorcycle accident. And the word around the campfire, as they say, was that Mr. Habermus tried to kill himself then. So, evidently, as you will see in this report, Mr. Habermus was under a lot of duress. Now, I met with the lawyer a couple of days ago who had saw my first video. And he asked about Mr. Habermus. And, what do I know about Mr. Habermus? Well, I told him that the only thing I know is, from my source and, from the death certificate is, he committed suicide. He was reportedly had done thus, and so, which I just relayed to you guys. And, that is one of the reasons that, he possibly committed suicide, because he was under investigation. Now, the lawyer, very, very slick, very, I guess, how lawyers are. Like, lawyers going to make you think a whole different way. So he said, yeah, so he committed suicide. How do you know? Well, I went down to the clerk's office and, got the certificate. Yeah, and it said gunshot wound to the head. I said, yeah. Well, did it have any pictures? I said, nah. He said, okay, was it to the front of the head or the back of the head? And then I said, oh, okay. You're right. That it didn't say that. So then he began to tell me about, a certain group of officers that Mr. Habermus was associated with. He gave me a list of names and everything like that, and, said that they were part of, some kind of, aggressive unit or a search team unit, or I forgot the particular words he used, and I have those, those names somewhere around here. But he informed me, he said, okay, what, do you think, it could it be possible that, he did not commit suicide? That, he may have been taken out to, protect some other people. And mind you, of course, his death happened July the 17th. And if you recall, the arrest and the raids on the Deputy Schaefer's and the rest of Mike Cox happened there right around a month later. And so, we don't know if he left something in the suicide note, which you'll hear about later. But the lawyer also, made me think about, he said, okay, well, didn't he have a family? Where's his family at? Are they still around? Or have they disappeared? Maybe they're somewhere, in hiding. Maybe they've been placed in hiding, right? So all of those things kind of re-arouse my suspicion in the very unpublicized, very methodical occurrence of this police officer's death, the non-reporting of the manner of death, and the kind of, okay, life goes on mentality, or the life goes on sentiment that, an officer passed. And he just did not pass, he committed suicide. So, that caused me to go back and reinvestigate. And in the process of reinvestigating, I ordered the investigative report from the medical examiner. And I'm going to go over this real quick with you, just to give you some in-depth analysis of, once again, the death of Mr. Habermas. Now, this report was made by the medical examiner, the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner in Raleigh, North Carolina, and it's dated July 19th, 2023, only 2 days after Mr. Habermas' death. And it lists Mr. Habermas. Also, his residence is 101 Brookside Way, Pikeville, as they say, Pikeville, North Carolina, in Wayne County. Age 45, male, of white and non-Hispanic origin. The onset of illness or injury is 4:30 p.m. July 17, 2023. Viewing of the body is listed at 7:30, and the scene of death is listed at the UNC Wayne Memorial Ward. The law enforcement officer, Officer Sellers, I assume that he was the first on the scene. Now, it's also questionable. There is no autopsy. None. There was no autopsy done on his body, I assume, because it was a gunshot wound to the head. Apparently, they felt that there was no need. Toxicology reports came back, with no illicit substances in his body. Probable cause of death, and once again it says probable, but it says gunshot wound of head. Gunshot wound of head. And this report was made by one Jessica Taylor, the medical examiner, and the county of appointment is listed as Wayne. Now, the means of death is listed as a gun, and the type of gun is listed as a .40 caliber handgun. And I've been shot with one of those before, so I know the kind of damage that they can do to one's body. Activity of descendant on the premises. Fatal injury or illness occurred on the job. No. So, once again, his death did not occur on the job. That's maybe why there was no big fanfare, or any public show of affection for Mr. Habermas. And once again, there may have been, and I just maybe missed it. But once again, I think that this death went under the radar. It says fatal injury or illness at the house, type of house, specific location. It is listed in his yard. So, death occurred while in custody? No. Death occurred on state operated facility? No. Condition of the body: warm, rigor mortis or stiffness, meaning he'd been dead for a while. None. Height was 6 feet. Estimated weight was 220 pounds. Eye color blue. And he was wearing 2 tennis shoes, 2 black socks, shorts, a black belt, black boxer shorts, and a green shirt. No valuables were found on the person of Mr. Habermas. Now, this is the diagram, and I guess it's pretty telling, it's pretty direct, of an apparent suicide. They list, the face listing this way, and there's a big entrance hole right here, and it says a 1.5 jagged wound, exposed fractured skull, surrounding skull instability, and inward collapse. That means, I would show it to you, but it's self-explanatory. So the gun, evidently he was right-handed, so he put the gun to his head here. And then there's a what they call a stellate pattern wound, approximately 1 1/8 inches, in the skull instability stipping. I don't know what that means. No, that's still on the other one. So basically, the smaller wound right here. So I guess he shot himself right above the ear. And I don't know. I think if you're gonna kill yourself, you're supposed to put it right here. But I don't know. Thank the Lord, I haven't got to that point. Prayerfully, I won't get to that point. But that shows a possible suicide, which I think in this synopsis of events almost discounts the lawyer's theory of maybe Mr. Habermas did not take himself out. So I'm going to read this summary. It says medical examiner's preliminary summary of circumstances surrounding death. Now, this is the preliminary summary. I don't know if there's a post-preliminary summary somewhere. But nevertheless, I'm going to read this to you. Miss Taylor stated that I was contacted by the Wayne County Sheriff Office in reference to the death of Mr. Matthew Habermus. Mr. Habermus did not have any known medical conditions. He did not suffer from any diagnosed mental illness, nor had he ever attempted to harm himself. He was not known to use alcohol, tobacco, nor illicit drug use. Very, very informative paragraph, because why would this, once again, 45-year-old decorated officer with no history of mental illness or no history of trying to harm himself, not a drinker, not a smoker, not a substance abuse user, just decide to end it all? There's once again the reports from my sources saying that he was under investigation, and they may had been closing in, or the walls been closing in on him. But the paragraph continues to read, according to his parents, Mr. Habermas had been under increased personal stressors lately, especially in the last 24 hours. On the afternoon of July 17th, the day he killed himself, allegedly, Mr. Habermas called his parents and told them that he was going to put an end to it and to tell his sons that he loved them. He then hung up the phone. I'm going to stop right there, because it was, reported to me that I think that his father wore, there's a long line possibly of police that run in his family. So it was sort of like if he was to be found out of these events, that he would be some kind of disgrace to his family. So that is one of the reasons why he decided to take the next step listed in these paragraphs. It said he was then seen walking out of his house, and who's seen him? He was then seen walking out of his house and through his yard, according to his neighbor. Now, was his neighbor just happening to be looking out the window? Was his neighbor, spying on him? So how, I don't know how they get this eyewitness testimony. Just so happened to be, looking at this incident. So he said he then hung up the phone. He was then seen walking out of his house and through his yard, according to his neighbor. He was seen holding a handgun to the side of his head and subsequently collapsing backwards onto the ground. 911 was called by the neighbor. EMS and law enforcement arrived, who assessed Mr. Habermas. He was pronounced as deceased and no resuscitative efforts were performed. Now, once again, this narrative may or may not be true. There's just a neighbor that says, yeah, I saw him walk out in the yard and, pull the trigger. Found herself dead. Beautiful house. I've been to the house. Been to the house. Been on the property. And very beautiful house, fenced in and everything. And and then once again for him to tell his sons that he loved them, like I don't know. I've never been to that place, so I can't put myself in that position. But I don't know. It just seemed very kind of strange to me that he could just be walking. Random neighbors just sees him go through all these things, walking out the house with a gun and just pull. That had to happen in a matter of seconds, maybe. But it said he was transported to the morgue where I was awaiting his arrival. His external examination was remarkable for a open wound with surrounding stippling or stifling over the right ear. There was a stellate appearing open wound slightly above the left ear. There was associated skull instability and left periorbital ecchymosis, which is pretty much just blood pooling in the eye, after something like that happens. And the gun was identified as his. Oh, I skipped a whole paragraph. I'm sorry, I'm going to go back. Otherwise, there were no abnormal findings. Specimens were easily collected. But the paragraph before this reads, law enforcement performed a scene investigation in which they were able to positively identify Mr. Habermus, as his parents were on the scene and he was also holding his driver's license in his hand. That may be kind of suspicious, right? That almost be now I can see how this may have been, because you're holding your driver's license in your hand, but you shoot yourself. Boom. Right? And you fall backwards. Now, I've never shot myself, or I've never but how would your fist close? Would your fist open? So that's said he was holding. If you shoot yourself, I don't think you're guaranteed to keep holding something in your hand. Right? So there was also a .40 caliber handgun underneath his right foot. Underneath his right foot. So you shoot yourself, you fall backwards, and I guess you throw the gun a little bit down, and it ends up under your foot. Now, this is the whole scene. This is what they're saying. Within his residence, law enforcement located a suicide note, which was written in Mr. Habermus' penmanship. Written in his penmanship. How do you know? He also had his life insurance policies laid out for easy visualizations. The gun was identified as his duty weapon, which was a .40 caliber handgun. There was no alcohol nor drug paraphernalia located. Why? You've already told us that he doesn't use drugs, so why would that even be in there? His parents confirmed that he was right-hand dominant, which means, is he right-handed? Did he shoot himself? Yeah, he's right-handed. So that pretty much ends the investigation. I discussed my external examination findings with the investigating officer, as all collected evidence suggested that Mr. Habermus' death was suicidal in nature. There was no indication for an autopsy. Thus, his body was released to the funeral home of the family's choice. His electronic death certificate was completed on 7/18/23. His cause of death was listed as a gunshot wound of the head. Now, when I first read this, I was like, okay, there's no way that, the lawyer's theory can be true. But just reading this now on this live, recording, I see how maybe even this summary of events could be staged. Because once again, how do you shoot yourself in your hand? That's just like me shooting myself. I got my cell phone here, boom, and I just hold on to my cell phone like this, I don't know. You tell. Once again, I'm not a forensic death, suicidal gunshot scientist, but it seems implausible to me that, he would be able to hold on to his license in his hand. Also, how did the gun, if he shot himself, fell backward? If you shoot yourself, does your arm immediately go down, or does your arm stay up and you fall down? How does the gun end up underneath your right foot? And where is this witness at? Who was this witness? My number is 919-587-7782. Within his residence, law enforcement located a suicide note. Oh, how convenient. Suicide note, life insurance policy, everything is set up. So, and then of course they say he was right hand dominant. So just reading this to you once again, that this anonymous neighbor that just happens to just be walking outside and sees all this occur at the right time at the right place. And once again, this could be true, but the other scenario is starting to, kind of fit the narrative. Now, once again, we know what's going on with the sheriff department. Even though this guy, I think he was a sheriff, a Goldsboro police officer, but we know all of those guys and departments work together. Federal investigation right now, and it's reported to be, some more bombshells that's going to be dropping real soon. So was his death, his suicide, or his apparent suicide related to all of the things that seemingly followed his death thereafter, soon after? And was, where is his family at now? Where is his, his sons at? Where is his significant other, his girlfriend at? That is not mentioned. If I'm not mistaken, it was told that he did have a living girlfriend. I may be wrong, but where are all these other players at? After this story ends. So this is definitely something to I think to look into. First of all, just because of the minimal coverage of it, and I guess what people responded to the first video was like, well, no, they don't tell it, they don't tell everything, when something like this happened, they tell about other suicides in the paper, what makes this different? Tell about other shootings, tell about other overdoses. So I don't see why this situation, just because it was a law enforcement official, should be treated any different than any other suicide. God bless the dead. I remember God bless the dead once again, and this is no, to bring up any bad memories, but I remember when Jamie, known as J1, and and his girlfriend, they didn't say, okay, both of them died peacefully at home. They said, okay, yeah, it was a murder-suicide. Very clearly. So, I think the misinformation, let's say that, the misinformation or the failure to disclose information may be something that needs to be examined and makes this situation, in my opinion, look a little more suspicious to me. Having insurance policies laid out, suicide notes, so readily available. An anonymous neighbor just so happened to see everything go down. Gun under the foot, license in hand. It's almost like too perfect, right? Reading this, everything is too perfect. A lot of times, what they say, something sounds too good to be true, it normally is, right? It's not true, but nevertheless, I'm gonna let you once again chew on that information. Supposed to be getting some more information about this situation in the AM. So hopefully, if anything that I said was incorrect, my number is 919-587-7782. And keep in mind, I'm not gonna debate with anyone in the comments. You can share your opinion. You can also attack me as long as you want, but I'm not gonna spend time debating on something that is my opinion based on stipulation of facts. So, and I think that's what, as I told one debater today, said that's what your man Trump. That's what Trump says makes America so great, that we all are able to have an opinion. We all are able to express our thoughts and emotions based on our own experiences. And me having these experiences of dealing with corrupt law enforcement for probably the better part of 30 years, and in this corrupt scene, I have my own way of looking at these things where I always question, what is set before me. I have been through so many near-death and life-changing and life-threatening situations when I see something tragic. And once again, this is a tragic situation. Nonetheless, rest in peace to Mr. Habermas, and peace and comfort to his family. But I don't get all emotional about these type of situations. I look at them for what they are, and I examine the whys and the hows. Without any emotional. It's almost like a war veteran who comes back from Iraq with all types of bloodshed and body wounds and losing friends and battle-tested scars, and you expect him to look at a murder on the street the same way that someone who has not been through anything is supposed to look at it. He's going to look at that and probably just, go home and eat a bowl of cereal. Somebody else might look at a dead body on the street and it'll scar them for life. They're crying. They're writing articles about it, or whatever the case may be. So this is why I can look at these things and not get emotional and not, get all in my feelings about whether this should have been said or this should have not been said. Things of that nature. So, just keep that in consideration when, you're expressing your opinions, on this YouTube channel or whatever, because I'm not going to debate with some things that I've only experienced. So I can shout it to the top of the hills. I can give you all sorts of examples. You won't understand my point of view, just like I may understand your point of view, but I won't agree with it. So that's the difference there. But yeah, Mr. Habermas' death is once again a very tragic situation. But concerning, once again, what we've seen, the corruption, the cover-ups, the failure to disclose all types of information from every aspect of this little town that we call Wayne County. Someone told me, they said it was two counties. It was two counties in North Carolina that the FBI said they do not, or the SBI, was one of the two, said they do not want anybody in their business. And I can't remember the other one, but one of them is Wayne County. They said they are the number one or number two county in the state that prefers not to have anybody looking into their business. And of course we see why from the top down. But you tell me what you think, man. 919-587-7782. We're gonna visit this story maybe tomorrow, when I get some more information. But I just had to revisit because the attorney that I spoke with, he definitely presented a case. And looking at this information, I don't see it to be too far fetched that possibly, this is more than it seems. It's more to Mr. Habermas' death than just an apparent suicide with a suicide note. Peace and blessings. Love. I'm out.